They created us. Legally, deliberately. They stripped tribal identity, mixed ethnic groups, imposed a single label, and codified it into a permanent caste. Not by accident, by design. The British didn't inherit the Spanish generic label. They refined it into a legal instrument. Negro stopped being a geographical observation and became a hereditary condition. You were born into it. You couldn't buy out of it. Your children inherited it. Their children inherited it. And then they ended it and said the inheritance stops here. But the inheritance of slavery transferred across generations just fine. The inheritance of what was built by those same people, suddenly, that has no legal continuity. If you haven't been noticing, something is happening. Across this country, Black Americans are trying to tell their story. Not the recycled version, not the weaponized version, not the one filtered through political convenience, but our story. There is an awakening. Not loud, not chaotic, not reactionary, but deliberate. We are not hopeless. We are not defeated. We are tired. Tired of being reduced to symbolism, tired of being invoked every election cycle, tired of being grouped into categories so broad that no specific claim can ever be addressed. And if we're going to talk about reparations, real reparations, then we must first clarify identity. Because identity determines eligibility. Eligibility determines claim. And claim determines justice. Right now, the word Black in America functions as a collective umbrella. And while solidarity has its place, policy does not operate on vibes. It operates on documentation. That is why this channel centers ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. ADOS is not a skin tone, it is not a trend, it is not a political slogan. It is a historical condition. It asks a simple question. Were your ancestors enslaved in the United States? If the answer is yes, then you descend from a people who were legally engineered into a permanent caste, stripped of tribe, language, family structure, and ethnicity, reclassified into a new category built for labor extraction and generational control. That system created a distinct ethnic formation, and that formation still exists. ADOS is lineage-based, it is harm-based, it is documentation-based, it is not race-gated. Because if this country intentionally mixed us, stripped us, and restructured us into a new people, then we do not fracture ourselves over the mixture that was imposed on us. We are a mixed heritage ethnic group created by U.S. slavery. That includes darker-skinned descendants, lighter-skinned descendants, white-presenting descendants, Hispanic-presenting descendants. Color hierarchy was imposed as a control mechanism. We do not replicate that mechanism internally. Cohesion is not weakness. Cohesion is strategy. Now you may hear other terms used alongside ADOS. It is worth understanding the distinctions. FBA, Foundational Black Americans. It centers cultural identity and historical pride, and that has real value. But FBA reintroduces Blackness as a requirement for the claim. And when your framework is harm-based and lineage-specific, race as a gate weakens the argument, legally, structurally, and federally. Not because FBA is wrong, but because precision is the point. Black American. You will hear this term sparingly, because that category has been stretched, globalized, politicized, and collapsed across immigrant, ethnic, and historical distinctions that do not share the same lineage-based claim. When everyone is grouped together, no specific claim can be accurately measured. Reparations cannot be administered to a vibe. They must be attached to a record. And this is where colorism has quietly done its damage. We have family members, cousins, relatives who don't present as black, but can trace their lineage directly to American slavery. And because of how they look, they have been pushed out of the conversation. That is not precision. That is another form of curation. ADOS removes appearance from the equation entirely. The record is the qualifier. By 1662, Virginia codified partus, sequitur, ventrem. The child inherits the mother's status. No matter the father's race or status, no matter the circumstances of the child's birth, if the mother was enslaved, the child was property. Combined with laws on inheritance, legitimacy, and mobility, this created a fully self-perpetuating labor caste. The system no longer needed to import people. It reproduced them. Consider the numbers. In 1733, the enslaved population in the Carolinas and Georgia numbered roughly 150,000. By 1805, just 2 years before the importation of new enslaved people was banned, that population had quadrupled, exceeding 600,000, entirely through births. This growth occurred even as white populations in many counties were far smaller. Enslaved people outnumbered whites 2-1 in regions of Georgia and South Carolina. America no longer needed new imports. The system reproduced itself. By 1865, when slavery was legally abolished, the enslaved population exceeded 4 million. A fully domesticated workforce built entirely by law and natural reproduction. Yet, when the chains were removed, the economic inheritance of their labor was never returned. Generations have been bound to a system that extracted their labor without compensation, without continuity, and without justice. This was deliberate. Every law, every restriction, every codification, all of it engineered a lineage-based caste, creating a distinct people whose labor, culture, and endurance would shape America's wealth. And that, precisely, is the foundation of the ADOS claim. Measurable, intergenerational harm, created by design, not accident. Which is exactly why part of this work involves building the infrastructure for ADOS claimants across all 50 states to connect, verify lineage, and document modern history together. That is coming. But this channel is not just about reparations. It is about culture as capital. Before the first railroad was laid, before the first university was built, before the first dollar was printed, there was labor, there was culture, there was production, and there was faith. Christianity, not empire theology, not prosperity spectacle, not trauma-centered performance, but endurance theology, identity-rooted faith, discipline-centered faith. Our ancestors were not passive recipients of distortion. They preserved moral structure under pressure. The Black church became our first autonomous institution. Faith became psychological scaffolding, not because it was perfect, but because it stabilized us. And communities that lack moral coherence cannot sustain institutions. Institutions that lack continuity cannot build wealth. Wealth that lacks discipline cannot transfer across generations. This channel is not only about policy, it is about inheritance. Culture is not entertainment. It's behavioral programming. And if you do not curate your culture, someone will curate it for you. That is what curated culture is, a psychological inheritance that shapes behavior without consent. And the work of this channel is understanding how that happened, reclaiming the moral framework it displaced, and holding ourselves and each other accountable to something higher than what was handed to us. The descendants of that production deserve precision, not performance. This channel exists for 3 reasons: to keep the record, to establish ethnic clarity, and to build the kind of accountability and cohesion that cannot be borrowed from another group's framework. It has to be built from within. Record keeping without clarity is just archive. Clarity without accountability is just identity politics. And cohesion without a moral framework, well, that's just tribalism. This channel refuses all 3 of those traps. The foundation of everything you will hear here is documented in the Ode series. The American Descendant Record, Volume 1, 2nd edition, Volume 2 and 3 are available now. The rest is coming. Links are in the description. We are not building a movement on emotion. We are building a record on evidence. And we are building a people on accountability. Because if the next generation has to start over, we failed them. Welcome to the Inheritance Channel, where identity is clarified, where history is quantified, and where inheritance is defined, not assumed.